So I've had a few times in my life that I wanted to fast forward through. The first was in the spring of 2005. I was about 13 and I was living in Louisiana with my mom and my older brother Jason, who is blind, autistic, and intellectually disabled. I have 7 brothers and sisters besides Jason, but they were all old enough that they had grown up and moved out of the house by then, so it was just 3 of us. And I don't really remember a lot from that time, but what I do remember is the day that Child Protective Services came to the house to tell my mom that because of her severe alcohol and drug addiction, she had 2 options. She could either go to rehab, which would allow her to maintain custody of me, or if she refused rehab, she would be able to maintain her custody. And she chose that option. So as soon as my dad learned what was happening, he drove down from Pennsylvania to pick me up, and he brought me all the way back up here to live with him. And my brother Jason had to stay with my mom because even though he was blind and autistic, he was technically an adult, so the state couldn't actually remove him, and she would never let him go with anyone else. So fast forward to 2015, my mom and Jason had moved to North Carolina at some point to meet her new husband, which was her geographical cure at the time. And they were living there for over 2.5 years, and every time I talked to Jason, because I had maintained a relationship with him even though I didn't have one with my mom, he always just sounded so depressed on the phone. He didn't have a job, he wasn't doing anything with his days, and he's the kind of person who loves to work, loves to stay busy and to have a purpose, and he just wasn't getting that. So I called the social services office in the county where they were living, and I just kind of explained the situation and asked if they could make Jason and my mom aware of what resources and job opportunities were available to him. And they did that, and the next time I talked to Jason, he had a job and he sounded much happier. But I still wasn't completely satisfied because I knew that that wasn't really a safe environment for him. So the social services office also set them up with a social worker named Ruth who would go and check in on them from time to time and just make sure he was okay. And Ruth told me that based on her visits to the house, she could tell that it really wasn't a good situation for him to be in, but because she never actually caught them in a situation that put Jason's life in immediate danger, there was nothing she could do to remove him. Fast forward to May 8th, 2018. I was at work and I got a phone call from Ruth telling me that my mom was in the hospital because she fell and hit her head that morning because of her drinking, and I had to come down and get Jason pretty much right away or he was going to be taken into the state's custody. Apparently what happened that morning was Jason was getting ready for work and was trying to talk to our mom, but he's completely blind, so he couldn't see that she was passed out on the floor. So when his driver came to the door to get him to take him to work, he asked the driver to please check on her, and the driver found that she was passed out, so he called the ambulance. And the driver then took Jason to work and told his supervisor, who then told Ruth, who then called me. So when I learned that this happened, I immediately called Jason because I wanted to make sure he was okay and just make sure he really understood the situation. And he did, and he seemed to be okay, all things considered. Next, I called all of my sisters who live in this area, Jason's aunts, anyone who I thought should know and would be able to help me figure out what the hell to do once Jason came up here to live up here for good. The next person I called was my mom's husband. I had never spoken with him. They were actually separated at the time, but he had a good relationship with Jason, so I thought he might be able to help in some way because he was down there in North Carolina. So he did. He offered to let Jason stay with him for a few days and then drive him up to Pennsylvania with all his belongings. So a few days later, Jason moved up to Pennsylvania, and the transition was a lot easier than all of us were expecting. Because Jason told us he had known for a long time that our mom needed help, and he actually suggested a few times that she go to rehab. And whenever she refused, he just kind of made the determination that he would really be better off living with someone else. He had asked her a few times actually if he could live in a group home to learn how to live independently, and she would never let him. I've found in life that sometimes things come full circle for me, so Jason was now going through exactly what I had gone through over 10 years ago with our mom. And it wasn't until many years after I went through that I learned the only reason that happened for me was because my siblings and my dad, all the way up here in Pennsylvania, were working with the social services office in Louisiana to get me out of there, which is exactly what I had been doing for Jason. Fast forward to today, Jason is still living in Pennsylvania. He's living in a group home where he gets to learn how to live independently. He goes to activities every week, gets to see his family members. He recently went to a prom for people with special needs, and he said it was just the best night ever. He had so much fun. And I recently received a text from my mom about a couple weeks ago telling me that she was celebrating her 1-year anniversary of sobriety, And while I'm still trying to learn how to build a relationship with her, I'm also learning that the times we want to fast forward through are usually the times that shape who we become. Thank you.